Get that started then.
Very pretty tonight.
She wasn't feeling good. She takes she's on chemotherapy, which is for her rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
And so they've upped her dose, and it's really got her. So that's the challenge for her. So tonight I just said, she's done that. So not to press my luck with her. So yeah, it's been a journey. Nasty stuff. It's sort of a familial thing. Her aunt died of this same stuff when she was. Hello.
Hey, Bobby, you got switched by vacuum?
Pardon?
Bobby got switched by vacuum?
Oh, no. Let's just close the door then, and feel free. Yeah. So I'm just wondering how far you got in the hallway.
I did this whole side,
Okay.
and then to the gray carpet over there.
Excellent. Thank you. Glad to see it. So,
Yeah. Well.
now you had a fan in this wing too, so did you have a chance to get that one done?
Yeah,
Okay.
like all the way down there.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Over this way. I think that may be part of what messed up my neck, honestly.
There's a lot of strain trying to get that sucker
Yeah.
working.
Well, I had a full day of massage too, so I was doing that in between massage, so I think that maybe was my
Oh, boy. Yeah, we're dealing with my son as well. He fell and hit his back on his curb. So he hit the curb as it was going down.
Oh my gosh.
So we're all having our issues.
Yeah.
Sure. Man, it's a tough season. It's just transition when nothing's quite ready. We're not in the rhythm of the winter yet.
No.
So that really makes it challenging. Well, wonderful. Well, I hope you feel better soon. Dear me, you've got a lot coming that's going to need your neck.
I do.
Dear me. So how do we negotiate to get you back? Can we put a bid in or something and say, we'd like you back in McCall?
Oh my gosh.
So anyway, I just throw that on the table. So that's just where we're sort of at.
Yeah, there's been a delay.
Yeah, so I've tried to sort of give us a forecasting of what's coming at us, and so. So this is sort of what I'm sensing is finishing up the course. And so how are you doing on assignments?
I at least started reformatting, but I didn't get super far with it.
Okay. So you have a sense of what you need to do to accomplish it anyway?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep, I feel good about it.
So now it's just getting like that. Okay. So, that's fine. And so what I'd like to request for our Jainism section is a $10, it might be $15 for the book. It's $10 for the Kindle one of this. If you like Kindle, if you're getting the real book, I always buy the real book because I like to mess with books. It's called Living Jainism and Ethical Science, and so I'm really short on Jainism, so I've got that one from my library as well. So just to give us a little bit of reading, a little more comprehensive reading on Jainism. And so if you could grab the introduction to world religions and the ontologies and try and work your way through Jainism, I think that would be helpful to you as well. Next week we're in Thanksgiving, so not to worry. And then the week following, the third, the third analysis on Jainism is due. And remember, that's when you read the introduction to world religions, find something that's fascinating, and write on one or two things, throw a paragraph or two at me.
Okay.
Okay. We're not going to do a scriptural comparison. We're just out of time at this point in the course.
Okay.
But I'd love it if you read it. I think you'd enjoy reading about the scripture itself. So that's just a recommendation. I hope you do it. The 10th is when I'll have the Buddhism quiz ready for you, and so again, it's from the same keywords that you saw in Hinduism. Okay, the 17th is when I'd like to see that project buttoned up.
Okay.
And we'd appreciate an oral presentation on it again, just to sort of see what your final thoughts are on the project and what you've discovered.
Okay.
There will be a final exam. It will be a paper this semester, and it's going to be on health and healing. And so my sense of that topic is it's going to be something like, how do we integrate the understanding of Indian religions into our communities, and so it would mean that we'd first of all get a sense of and I'll probably just say pick one religion, and so for you the natural one would be Hinduism. And then help us to sort of say, how do we get this mindset? And I'd like for you to pick up on the key topics so that you would show an understanding of what karma is. How do we make karma better understood in American society? So it'll take, so you'll have to sort of pick some of the key ideas in that religion, and then that have a recognition in healthcare, and how do we make it more accessible to the Western mindset, or how do we bring it into the Western communities? Not sure, but again, I'd like what I'm looking for is a practical application of the work you've done, so that you're really thinking about now how do we make it meaningful. So that's what I'm going to look. That's a 5 to 7 double-spaced paper that I'll be asking for. So it'll be something along those lines that I hope would be a nice capstone for the course, for you really to sort of say, okay, if I were to put Hinduism in my own personal practice, this is how I do it. Okay, so it really is. It really is to help you make it practical. That would be the point of the paper. Okay, so I hope it works. Okay, and I'm going to give you a couple of weeks. Due by first of the year. If again, in all your chaos, you were to give me a help, but my rationale for that is I've got another course starting in January, so I'd really love to have this buttoned up by the first Thursday in January. It's I think the 7th or 6th or something when it's my first Thursday. So that's why I'm trying to get this done before I start anything else. So hope your schedule will allow you to punch through the Christmas season. Okay.
I should be able to do that easily.
Okay. I'd also like to introduce my course that I'll be Zooming again. And it's an introduction to bioethics and scarce resources. What that means is primarily the conversation will be on distribution of vaccines. Bioethics is the philosophy of the hospitals. That's what the program is. We explain the major principles of healthcare, and then we begin applying them in a particular way. And for this course, I'll be doing scarce resources. And specifically, the conversation is, what do you do with a vaccine that you don't have enough for? How do you do that under the principles of bioethics? And those principles include justice. So you've got to sort of figure out, how do you justly distribute scarce resources? And so it's a part of our spiritual guide and spiritual healers program that we'll be launching. One of the courses will be on bioethics. It'll be a full course, so this would just be a lovely introduction to someone that would be interested in the fuller 15-week course that'll come along at some point in the course schedule. But this one's going to be offered through. It's not going to be through the college. It'll be offered through. So I have no idea what the price is. It'll be offered through the Arts and Humanities. Every winter they offer a cabin fever series.
Oh, yeah.
So this will be one of the courses in cabin fever.
Okay.
And so I'll try and make sure you have information as soon as I have information. And obviously subject to your crazy schedule. Love it if you could find your way in. It would always be a joy to have you. Any questions on what's happening there? Is it doable?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any conversations or story for the good of the order? Were you able to do anything this past week other than try and move and throw your neck out and do all the other projects around this building that you've been so gracious to help us with? That you might have done anything else that's related to Buddhism or Hinduism?
I don't think so, really.
Yeah.
I mean, other than in this Ayurveda book, there's like a little quiz in it, and so I copied the quiz for Colt's parents, and Colt and I, and we all sat down and took the dosha quiz to find out what dosha we are.
Excellent. And what did you discover about yourself?
I'm Vata Pitta, that's water and fire.
Okay.
So that's my constitution, and it's kind of fun to just see what everybody turned out to be.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that'll be a section in your project. I think we've already talked to that'll make the cut, I assume, of content for your project.
Yeah, that is one of the more important.
Yeah, so that then you can become practical when you apply that to rebalance when you're ill or when you're struggling.
Yes.
Yeah, is that where you might go for your practical section of that?
I think I'll probably go for a case study just on how, like, what indicator you look at and find the problem, and then how you treat it.
Excellent. Okay.
Well, I'll definitely touch on those.
Yeah, on the various types. That's wonderful. Yeah, it is so stunning when you look at that on how people approach health. It's so different than how we've approached health, and it's quite striking. I thoroughly enjoyed doing it this time. I've never gotten into it like this with any of my Hinduism, and so it's a wonderful extension for us. And I'm fascinated. Again, my life guide is spiritual guide is healer. How do we adjust our guides, whether they're pastor, priest, shamans, whether they're gurus or Buddhist monks? How do we make them think like healers? Because the Western society has put pretty aggressive castles and moats around their way of thinking. Mm-hmm. And so for us to really capture that idea is that I have a healing role. We've got to do some hard work to get the thinking adjusted. I think Chinese medicine is way ahead of us on this conversation. I think if you were to talk to most people and say, hey, I think acupuncture would be a helpful tool, I don't think they give it, and it's sort of like, well, okay, well, where do I go do that? Mm-hmm. As opposed to Indian thought or Buddhist thought, it isn't even on the planet for the way people think. And so we'd really have to think about that. And maybe that is sort of some of your life work, is how do you how do you begin to get that practical application into the lives of people that's meaningful? And so that's an interesting project. So the conversation tonight are a spiritual guide as healer and healing strategies from Buddhism. And so I trust you enjoy how Buddhism thinks about it, because again, you're going to discover that they went off in a new direction. That's a fascinating direction. One of my projects when I was in graduate school was to write this. And it started out as a paper, and I think it would still be read as an academic paper by most people. But it was just my work in this exact topic: of how do you develop healing strategies? How do you think like a healer? And then to take some of the ancient mechanisms that are pretty unknown in our culture and begin to write on them. And so this is something that you could get tonight on the Kindle edition anyway, from Amazon if you wanted to pull it in. And so it's the sort of the basis of our conversation tonight, in how to do that. So just a crazy thought. Yeah, very good. And so, our problem, failure of modern medicine to understand social healing. So if you were to come up with your own understanding of what that term might be, what would you sense that would mean? What in the world are you trying to say when you say social healing?
Probably how everybody impacts each other in the process of healing. Either we support each other and lift each other up, or we're maybe pushing each other into further disease, depending on how we're coming together.
Okay, exactly. And yet, if you were to talk to someone in your family that has done the work you've done, how might they interpret how their community affects their health? That they're sicker or healthier because of people around them. Do you sense that your immediate circles have a sense of that? Again, I think we can almost say pre-pandemic. I think we're all learning something in the pandemic on this one. But my instinct is that most people are highly individualistic when it comes to healthcare. So that they don't even assess their social structure as to say, how are the people around me making me sick? Doesn't get done. So this is, I think, where your work and what I'm trying to say has been my work, has tried to begin to really ask those questions in a significant way. And yes, we have counselors that use a psychological basis, but I would argue most counselors use an individualistic strain. So they don't try and take a social strain when they're trying to solve problems. They take a very egocentric train. What is happening within you? Tell me what's going on within you. Our social workers are in the ballpark of what we're talking about. They're clearly trying to help the social structure. And yet they tend to get trapped in the bureaucratic functions of the government wanting to get things done, wanting to take care of children and move or adjust children that may be at risk, working through some of those real challenges. Being a resource in a hospital, a social worker is a resource trying to put the families together and make the contact in those kinds of situations. But I would argue they don't think that they can be a social healer when you're a social worker. Though they see healing and benefit to their work, clearly, I don't think they think like a healer, that they function that. I think the ancients did a much better job of doing that. So the approach that we're going to do with this problem is we're going to try and empower spiritual guides to recognize their role as spiritual and social healer in American healthcare. And so in our context, they have a role. If they haven't got the glasses on, they will never see their role. If we can give them a pair of glasses that helps them focus on the problem, then I would argue we can have a considerable impact in allowing people to recognize that there's social problems that is causing disease all around them. And if they functioned in a way, if they knew what to do, they could serve as healers in the social functions that are all around them. And so for me, that's just a pair of glasses. And then once they see it, then to have the motivation to say, okay, what training do I need to go through to be helpful in a social environment? Equivalent to how a medical doctor is trained to deal with the individual's issues. Let's do some training on social healing as well. And so this is where all of my work is really coming to a point of saying, I think we can do this. I think we can pull these threads together and form a tapestry that would be helpful to people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for my work, I went through shamanism. Again, I sure wish Ian was with us because I still haven't had that question. What in the world is his shamanism ceremony? And so did lots of work on how the shamans were successful healers. We live also in a culture that has been dominated by Christian thought. We've been Christian for most of our time. And the Christians are competitors. They are missionary and they are competitors to other religions. And so they have tended to frame all shamanistic activity as evil. That's just a short way that Christians have tended to define whatever shamans do, that they aren't Christian, and by default, they are evil. I would argue they aren't Christian, but they wouldn't have succeeded unless they were doing good in their communities. You don't last for 10,000 years, which is how long we've had shamans, to this day in communities, without them being successful. Their communities would have checked them out a long time ago, unless they figured out a way to be successful. That's just the reality of all religions and all spiritual healers. They're doing something. Well, what are they doing? I would argue they're social healers. They function by helping the larger body around an individual that is creating disease for the individual, and by adjusting the larger community, they mitigate disease that becomes apparent in the community through the social structure of it. And so this isn't going to be a lecture on shamanism, but I have one fun story I tell that I think illustrates it illustrates the story in some way. Then I'm going to have to think about it because I'm going to have to tell a story after I think about it because there's one element that I've realized has escaped me before I can tell the story. Oh, now I've got it. Okay. And so we take you into a classic tribal village, and one of the village women's name is Hillary, using modern terms just so it relates to people, but her name is Hillary. And Hillary has a terrible stomach. I mean, her stomach is upside down. It is always in crisis. It just feels terrible. She doesn't know what's wrong, but her stomach is always. And she's one of those people that puts her issues in her stomach. That's just part of it. And the issues of life, when she's struggling, she tends to put her issues in her stomach. And so Hillary wants to resolve this. And so she goes to the shaman in her village and says, I have terrible stomach aches. And as a result, I've got diarrhea, and I've got gas, and I've all these stomach aches. Can you help me? And the shaman says, yeah, I think I can help you. Are you going to be at the Friday night campfire? Yeah, I'll be at the Friday. Yeah, I'll be there. Yeah, and so great. We'll work on it together at the campfire. And so the shaman goes about his duties, and then Friday night comes, and really the whole community's now around the campfire. And so there's nowhere else to go. That's sort of theater for this village anyway. So they always come out to see what's happening. And so they're all around the campfire. And so as he arrives, he sort of surveys the audience, and he goes, yeah, Hillary's here, great. Then, oh, Bill's here too. That's good. Bill is right beside Hillary. That's really good. That's really important. And then the project starts, and the campfire is roaring, the huge bonfire in the middle of the village, and the shaman is in full regalia. He is just absolutely in full regalia. And so he starts his dance around the fire, and he's dancing and whooping, and just a great theatrical production for this entire community. And he's just doing a great job. And so once he gets into a good sweat, he's just working it up. He does a circle around Hillary, and everyone in the circle goes, oh, Hillary's got some problems. I wonder what the problems are. And so he goes around the campfire a couple of times, and then he goes around Hillary a couple of times just to make sure everybody's caught what's happening here tonight. And then he starts going around Bill, and everyone goes, oh, Bill and Hillary have got problems. I wonder what he's going to do. And so he weaves his way around Hillary and Bill, and then he goes across the campfire, and he starts circling Monica. And he starts circling Monica, and then he goes back and he circles Bill, and he goes back and circles Monica, and he goes back to Bill. And everyone in the camp goes, oh, I see what's going on. And poor Bill is beginning to slink in his seat, because he's realized that his little affair has just been outed in the community. And Bill and Monica have been having an affair. The shaman knew it. And after a swirling, and Hillary sees what's going on too. And she might have had a sense of it, but now not only she knows it, but the entire community knows what's going on in this little project. The shaman does his dance and collapses in a heap. And she goes up to him after the end of the campfire, and she says, thank you. I really feel better. But Bill goes, I think I've got a stomach ache.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, does that sort of help how social healers can function? And function well. And he also gives the bill to Bill for the event, for the therapy. He gets the bill for that event. But that's my best sense. And again, you've caught my little story. You're younger. You didn't go through the Bill and Monica disaster in American life. So you've only heard about it, I assume.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you're right.
And so it was such a horrible tragedy for the Clinton administration, and an even greater tragedy for Hillary to be a first lady and to have to deal with that horror story all across the screens. And so the shaman is responsible for that kind of work, plus lots of others. And we talked about that last week. The shamans are responsible for the same thing that we saw within Hinduism. That they are medicine men. They're responsible for all the knowledge in the forests around them. And so they have a physical capacity of serving as medicine men and women around the world. So they have that, but they also have a social capacity. And so that just hopefully illustrates that because you have to ask the question, how do I help our society? And an awful lot of times it's just turning a light on it and making sure people know what's going on, and making sure it just doesn't devolve into destructive gossip, but it turns into socially constructive awareness, so that people can't just hide their skeletons in the closet any longer, because those skeletons are causing illness elsewhere in the community. And it might have been causing illness in Monica's family. It was clearly causing illness in Hillary's family, and it needed to be resolved. And there's tools and strategies for doing it. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just one element where social healers can serve. And so shamanism is fascinating. Buddhism we'll study tonight. And Mexican spiritualism is another way, particularly women in a culture that serve in a similar role of being social healers, though also being very aware and often of the chemistry of the world around them, and the natural products that they can use as well. But Mexican spiritualism is much more involved with women, whereas shamanism has classically been men, though there are women shamans. So the pathway is first an understanding of a larger that inform all settings, and to develop an analysis of the healing practices and successes of the three decisions, and then finally develop a new form of healing defined as social healing. So that's our pathway that I want to work on tonight. When it comes to illness, obviously, we've got to figure out what's our ability to heal the sick. And what's really striking is the ability to heal the sick is an important, if not key, characteristic of every major religion. But as a Western society, if you were to say, well, how do you heal the sick? I'd go to my doctor. It's not, I'm going to my priest or my pastor or my monk or my rabbi. I'm going to my doctor. So, and yet every religion, that's a key characteristic, is the capacity to heal the sick. So there's been such a striking ripping asunder of the religious understanding of how to heal things and a medical, physical, physician understanding of how to heal the sick. The primary focus of most religions remains the cure of the soul. But if you cure the soul, what the religions realized is that you reduced illness and sickness. But that's also been disconnected, so that the cure of the soul doesn't even get associated with being healthier. It's just been spiritualized to the point of, okay, now you can go to heaven. And so cure of the soul often has a spiritual endpoint that's disconnected to, and you're living a better life and you're healthier. And so that disconnection is quite profound within Western culture as well. And so the religious community often promises the salvation of the individuals as individuals from sickness, poverty, and all sorts of distress and danger. And so, and even now, wow, what religion does that? Okay, it doesn't do a very good job of wanting to manage sickness, let alone using its resources that it has to affect sickness. It almost really doesn't even give a rip about poverty anymore. When you look, it motivates many of its parishioners to help the poor, but the number one tool of religion is getting the poor out of poverty. But it doesn't know that. And if it does, it doesn't do that. And it doesn't invite people to come into its setting and to say, hey, these ideas and these thinkings is going to help you out of poverty. Who says that is a religious commitment and a religious goal? And yet it is. If you look at the history of the planet, the number one pathway out of poverty has been religion. And that should come as a shock, but it is. What religion does is help people discipline their lives. What they need if they're in poverty is the discipline to get out of poverty. And that discipline moves them out of poverty. The number one way in American history of people getting out of poverty is religion. But our generation has no sense of that whatsoever. So the cure of the soul should help in the sickness, it should help in poverty, and I think it's been helpful in danger and distress. Okay, so I think our religious communities have caught their need there. But it is stunning how they've forgotten these first two. And yet when you look at the history of religion, you'll see that all religions did that. And probably will discover that was why they were most useful, is they helped people in their sickness and their poverty. Because that's what the daily lives of so many people were and are. But we don't use that now in a way that would allow people. Or we've just forgotten. Or we don't care. And I don't think it's that. I think there's a forgetfulness in the religious community that has allowed them to forget this. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. What I'm wondering is it the subjectivity of religion that makes it so hard for people to connect with, because we live in such a logical, left-brain society where we want to see the numbers to prove why something works, and religion and spirituality is so subjective to each person. You know, we're all experiencing something different as we encounter that. So, it's kind of crazy.
Isn't that interesting? And yet, from a financial point of view, you can show clearly that religion changes your financial life. We've been doing those studies for a couple hundred years on the role of religion to increase your wealth. And it's a frustrating relationship, because as soon as you get wealthy, you forget your religion. But the number one vehicle in American life of wealth was religion. No question. And it's been documented over and over and over. And the primary text, again, comes from Max Weber. And Max Weber is your number one sociologist. When you're studying sociology in America, your first person that you'll discover is Max Weber, a German sociologist, one of the fathers of sociology. And his primary book is defining this, how American capitalism is built on the Protestant ethic. So that Protestantism, when it arrived in America, gave them the foundation to get rich. But it was the Protestantism that gave that to them. It was the discipline of Protestantism that allowed early capitalism to flourish. And he made that connection utterly clear. And it's accepted to this day. And so religion has this capacity of helping with sickness, which is pretty well forgotten, helping with poverty, which is pretty well forgotten, and woe to us for having been so forgetful. And we'll discover that Buddhism tonight will do the same thing, that it was successful because it worked on both of these areas. But Buddhism in America has no impact, or has no, or very small amount of Buddhism even talks about this. So that it isn't even recognized for being successful in these two areas. And it is successful. Any group that can offer effective healing will find its concomitant messages more palatable to listening audiences. And so We've discovered that in the story of Jesus. Jesus was successful because he healed people. Okay? And so that was his number one project for being successful, is the ability to heal people. And so, and his disciples were also expected to heal people. And because of our understanding of Western medicine, the vast number of Christians in American society can't imagine they could heal anybody. And so that becomes the challenge for religious people. The process of healing usually requires the services of the healer. This charismatic individual becomes the conduit that brings the healing properties that are found in every major belief system. They've all got it. And you can trail out like you're doing now with Indian religion, and you can see, and you can get a sense of confidence that, this might work. In fact, this does work. And it has worked for thousands of years. But we aren't transmitting that knowledge very well. And that's a blinder that we have because of the Western culture. So for the mechanisms of healing, they're usually wrapped in cultural and religious ritual that frames the healing within a context that narrates meaning to the seeker. And so ritual is the driving force of healing. And so because people will engage in the ritual, they will get better. Now, you just might say that's just the placebo effect. They think they're getting better. And I'd say, yes. Because if their mind is attuned to wanting to get better and believing you're going to get better, then isn't the mind amazing? Because you do get better. Mm-hmm. But if you don't engage the mind at all, with what we would call the placebo effect, giving someone a sugar pill, saying, here's your healing, and they give them a sugar pill. And the placebo effect, their brain says, oh, I'm going to get better. And they do, which means the brain does have a healing effect for an awful lot of diseases. Now, obviously, it's not going to help you with a broken bone, but it certainly might help you with ulcers. It certainly might help you with digestive diseases. It certainly might help you with mental diseases. Direct connection, which is a whole lot of the diseases that we're dealing with. It's not going to help you in arthritis. It's not going to help you in so many of these other areas that demand another pathway for success. But there's a lot that it can help with. In the vast majority of healings, a wide variety of contributing elements, psychological, social, moral, and spiritual components are at work. These elements contribute to varying degrees to the disease, and most must be dealt with for the effective resolution of the illness. And so if someone comes into a physician and says, hey, my liver's failing, my liver's crashing, I got it. I'm almost ready for a liver transplant because my liver's almost toast. And the physician doesn't deal with the social reality that alcoholism has been going for generations through this family, and doesn't attempt to solve the social problem of alcoholism and the way of dealing with problems by using alcohol, then yes, they can give them a liver transplant, but all they're going to do is trash the next liver too, because you're not dealing with alcoholism. And alcoholism is a classic social problem. Your grandparents dealt with their problems that way, your parents dealt with their problems that way, and you've got a pathway and you test it out, and whoa, if you numb yourself enough, you solve your problems, seemingly. But the net result, your liver's crashed. So if you can work the community, you can solve a disease. And that kind of thinking is very, very helpful. So healing is the essence of an act of recreation. We recreate a person when they give them back a healthy life. And that's recreating their life. And that form of creation and recreation is an essence to what the healer can do and the goal that they can accomplish. All an afflicted person can do is send for a socially approved authority who can manipulate the symbols of healing with sacred stole, drums, or a stethoscope to render healing in the ill. We go to our doctors, and the number of symbols that they fling at us is stunning. They all have the stethoscope around their neck or in their pocket that you can clearly see their stethoscope. They almost all still carry it to this day. They almost all wear white. And they make sure other people that aren't physicians have different colors, so that the cleaner has a different color than the nurse, which is often, then they almost all make sure that the physician is in white, because white is meaningful to their audience. They make sure that the environment is perceived to be a healing environment, whether it's the color of the paint on the walls or whatever they do. They work very hard to build a symbolic place that will allow people to perceive that they're going to be healthy. Why? Because they're managing the brain. They're managing the way people interpret what healing might be. And so what other symbols does your physician use to convince you that they've got a successful plan for you?
I'm thinking about like the plus symbol.
Excellent.
I'm not
Yep.
pretty sure.
Yep.
And I'm thinking actually of dispensaries in Washington and Oregon that use that symbol
Yep.
on their signs.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Yep.
To indicate like this is medicine or whatever they're
Sure.
trying.
And so tell me what that symbol is in its origin.
Well, I imagine its origin is a Christian cross.
Yeah. And so there is the symbol of healthcare. Well, what is that? Well, that's the symbol of Christianity.
Yeah.
And why did they use it? Because it's been successful,
Well,
and it's interpreted as a healing place.
yeah. Well, and our hospitals are called St. Mark's, St. Luke's, St. Whoever.
And everybody says that. Oh, I'm going to St. Luke's. Who the heck was St. Luke?
Yeah.
Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. St. Luke wrote one of the texts in the Christian canon of literature. It's called Luke's Gospel. St. Luke himself, we think, was a physician.
Okay.
And he wasn't even a disciple, but he was a historian. He was tasked as a historian who would write what now is the third story of Jesus' life, the Gospel of St. Luke. But he was a physician, and what he brought to the table was a particular interest in the medical issues. And so can you imagine a physician sitting around going, wow, Jesus is healing people. And literally you had a physician of his day hearing about the stories of Jesus' healing. Well, that's a little more affirming about their possible success if you've got a physician actually watching this and writing about it. And the other thing is physicians tend to be very sensitive to women. Obviously, most of their patients during their career are women. Women, because of the realities of their lives, are sicker than men typically are. And women will go to a physician faster than most men have always done. And so Luke's stories are also stories of women. So he has far more stories of women in his narrative of Jesus' life. So he's a really interesting person that comes and brings the story of Jesus from his perspective. That's St. Luke's. Okay, so who would you rather have on your hospital? St. Luke, but then if nobody knows the name, then it doesn't have any more power. It's just St. Luke's. And so I think I'm making my case even stronger. Religion has had a tremendous impact on the health care of people in America, to the point where they name all their hospitals after these folks. So it's the religion that's bringing to bear the healing, and it's symbolic. Excellent. Another symbol is that little white piece of paper. Woe to you if you walk out of that room without a symbolic white piece of paper in your hand. And don't just give me a dang computer file. Give me a real piece of paper with something on it. Yeah, that's been very symbolic of our healing. Okay, so those symbols are terribly important to us when it comes to healing and the reality of healing. So let's look at the healing process. And so what I'd like to argue is that what the medical community has focused on is the biological part of healing. But I'd like to introduce you to the psychological, which I think we're pretty good at. Most of us understand that psychology has a value to healing. But here's the one I want to think about, is the social. What are the roles of peers? What are the roles of family circumstance? How does school make me sick? And in that, I'm arguing that our mental health is particularly vulnerable as a result of the social and psychological. So when it comes to the healing process, let's break it down in a little different way, and try and begin to understand the social element of healing, so that if we understand that, then we can begin to see where we might intersect with people. And so, because often if you say, well, how do you get well? Well, I go to the doctor. That isn't accurate. You do an awful lot more than just go to the doctor when you get sick. So let's evaluate that. We have to understand illness to understand the process that defines the healing event. But the perception of the feature the individual must change with the cultural context. I will argue that there's at least 5 phases to illness resolution. The first phase is you try and treat yourself, right? You've been sick like this in the past. You've got stuff in your cabinet. You go to your cabinet and you pick the stuff that worked before. And if it works, you're good. You don't say a word. You don't do a thing. You just get on with your life. Okay? So the first one that's really quite important is, how do you treat yourself? So you are your first healer, right? Okay? So you heal yourself first. Okay? Now what do we do second? This is the social diagnosis. Those around the ill person seek to offer advice. Okay? What do? You go to your closest person and say, I don't feel very good. And what do they do? Oh, you know what I did? What I tried was and they tell you what's in their cabinet. Okay? And they'll start giving it to you. You know, they'll go and get their cabinet and give all the stuff they've had as success. You might have never had that before. I couldn't believe when I hurt myself the other day. Here my wife was dragging out her muscle relaxants, you know, and she was chopping them up into little bitsy pieces, and she was saying, you know, this is what we need. And when I eventually got to the doctor says, well, you might need a muscle relaxant. And I went, got that covered already. My wife's been feeding me this stuff. I never did take it. But there it was. She was using what works for her, for me. So your second healer are the people around you. They desperately want to help. They might give you wonderful good news. They could equally give you that, you know, old wives stuff that just, you know, doesn't work at all, but makes everybody feel better. You know, like we stick a garlic on our chest to keep the Dracula away. Yeah, that's, you know, the worst example, but we do things like that. And when your mom rubs eucalyptus oil on your chest, it actually works. You know, there's a value for that. And so self-diagnosis, because but this is also something you got to be aware of, is their social destruction also takes place as others flee from the ill. Okay? If you were to stand up and say, I got COVID,
Yeah.
watch what will happen in the room, including me.
Yeah.
Okay? You utterly destroy your social network
Yeah.
when you have an illness that they can't manage. Leprosy, horrible disease, destroyed people's lives. Smallpox destroyed people's lives because they had to isolate them. They didn't know what it was. They tried all sorts of crazy stuff trying to help them, but it was always at a distance because they want you a long ways from them. Social destruction is very much a part of illness. And so what the society did is we're going to designate some people that will will try and help you. Now, and the third level is free counsel. And so you go to Google and you say, hey, nobody around me knows what this is, and you'll go to work trying to figure out who's going to give you free stuff. And you'll spend lots of time Googling. And that's new to our information, but we always, that was almost like that's our neighborhood knowledge on steroids is what Google is. It's everybody's knowledge. But it's everybody's good and bad knowledge. You can find the most horrific healing agent on Google because somebody thinks that you need to know this. And so it's as bad as it is good when it comes to, and that's the way it's always been. Because if your family didn't know how to heal you, you started wandering around the neighborhood and saying, hey, and if you were a threat, then your family was asking all their neighbors, please help us. We got a problem here. We got to figure out what to do with this because this person isn't going away and they're in the middle of me and we need help. So the neighborhood tends to be your third level of healers. They naturally do that. And that was the natural way of our women have served in that capacity. Our grandmothers have the knowledge of a lifetime on how to heal problems in their family and in their neighborhood. They would love passing it all over the neighborhood if they thought they could be helpful. So you have your free counsel. Then you have your doctor, and your doctor has always been expensive. So we always delayed going to the doctor because whoever wants to pay that bill? Because they're very, very expensive because it takes a long time to be an expert. These are culturally approved therapeutic experts. And their role is to not get sick when they get close to you and to get you healthy through whatever they have, and it's usually expensive because that's how they pay the bills. And their job is to reintegrate you into society or keep you apart from society. So they have all of the ability to throw you into a hospital, which is to remove you from society, or to say, you're healthy, go back home. And that's to reintegrate you into society. So when you look at really what illness is, it's a whole lot of social. Mm-hmm. And so all of these places are places that you can engage, except right here. You're not a physician. You don't have an MD behind your name. So there's some things only they can do. But look at all the other, everything else is what a social healer can do. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of jobs there that we can do to be helpful to people. Okay, so ritual typology is what social healers, specifically shamans, have done through the ages, is that they perform rituals. These are careful comparative observers can see a continuation of the use of formalized behavior in the context of all healing. They have support staff. They have, and this is what we're used to. White coat, stethoscope, examining table, computers, prescription pads. We've talked about that. But there's three classes of rituals that they've always used in developing healing rituals. There's supportive rituals. These buttress society that is at risk of erosion. It reduces anxiety by communicating the acceptance and integration of ill people. It soothes emotional unrest, and it communicates behavioral guidelines as effective boundaries. So a supportive ritual is part of it. And there's two types. We have maternal, which are disciplining or nurturing rituals. The mom kissing you on the head is a supportive ritual that all moms do for their kids. And there's the paternal, the disciplining, the protecting, that you do that again, and I'm gonna whack you. Don't put your hand in a fire. I'll whack you if you do that. So you have that paternal disciplining ritual. You do that, and I'm going to throw you in jail. That's a paternal communal discipline that we use to protect people who are going to hurt themselves. And we have both nurturing in our psychological counseling is a nurturing, very maternal ritual that we can go through for support. And so both of those are not only in the families, but all the way through society. And that is our supportive rituals. We have our redirective rituals, and we have the shaman dance. That's a redirective ritual. This is to reduce physiological tension in the group as a whole. But they also bond participants by explicating their common goals. And so, and they use those things that just make us work. We all know that drums impact our heartbeat. So if you get everybody on the same heartbeat, you really begin bonding rituals among people. And so these dances are known to help in the bonding. The excess of energy with an individual can find a pathway that channels surplus activity into actions that are not disruptive to the whole community. So you can work on social bonding, you can work on discipline or redirection to use. If a God is involved, it's religious. If not, it's secular or morally instructive. So that's our second, is the shamans of old have redirected people's activities. They know that if their community goes in this direction, it could be harmful. So they redirect the community to a new direction and a new path. And so those are important. And the third is reversal. And we saw this in the Holy Festival in Hinduism, is we do role reversal rituals where we get people to feel like an oppressed person, women to feel like men, men to feel like women, so that they role reverse to try and get things done. And there's various ways of symbolically doing that. And lots of folks use that kind of role reversal to do it. And so they take, there's permanent and there's temporary. And so those role reversals, when the sick become well, society must be informed. When the evil becomes saved, the society is aware. You cleanse them. And that's activation, social awareness. Baptism just is bringing somebody into a new community and giving them symbolic reference through the baptism that they're healthy for the community. Welcome them in, circle around them. Those are role reversal ceremonies because they once were outcasts, and now through the baptism, they become welcome in a new community. And so that role has changed. Radical changes has occurred, societies informed. Okay, let's take a break right now. But any thoughts on ritual and how ritual, I just flung this at you, but how ritual is absolutely imperative to the healing functions. We have to have ritual around us. Whether it's your doctor doing exactly the same thing every time they enter the room, or whether it's your pastor or your priest or your shaman, they're all doing ritual around you. And for us to be social healers, we have to begin to understand that we're going to have to do ritual for people. As I bet for your clients, you probably do the same thing for them every time they come in. You probably have candles going so that the environment is similar or the same. You probably have the same look and feel every time they come in. You're building your ritual of healing. and we have to magnify them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That's exactly what I was just thinking about, how, it's the music, the environment that I create, and then the question that I ask them, the questions, I ask them how they're doing, how their body's feeling, and then that starts that to get them like relaxing and feeling like they're being taken care of, and that's when healing starts.
Have you ever thought of that as ritual?
I haven't, but I do now. I see ritual in it now.
Okay. And why do we do ritual? Because it works.
Mm-hmm.
And people rest and feel comfortable once they know what's going to happen around them. So we give them a ritual.
Yeah.
And we give them different kinds of ritual. So there's just a few. Okay, let's take 5 minutes, and then we'll get into Buddhism explicitly. Okay, so how successful have I been at convincing you on the broad concept of a different kind of healer that I define as a social healer? Am I succeeding?
Definitely, I think super relevant to the work that I do.
Yeah.
Like, when I'm listening to people talk about their problems, I'm also listening to how they're talking about themselves, how they're talking about their loved ones and their friends, how they're talking about their connection to spirit. There's a lot that goes into what I'm listening for.
So I'm hoping you're affirmed on what you're doing is also highly valuable and not done enough in our community. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff that folks, when they figure this out, can do. But one of the ways I like to think about it is when you go visit someone in the hospital, and their whole family's in the room, and the physician might be the one taking care of the person in the bed, but you got a boatload of work to do with all the folks that are around the bed, because they're equally sick.
Mm-hmm.
And sickness means I can't do what I hope to do today,
Mm-hmm.
which includes everybody in the room. Because that's really what sickness does, is I am being stopped from doing what I would like to do on a normal day or in a normal course of events. Well, the entire family is sick then, because they can't do what they want to do. They're stuck in the hospital doing something. So there's lots of work to do for those around a person who's physically incapacitated and requires the work of physicians and nurses and medical staff. Fine. But there's a lot of other work that needs to get done. So we're going to develop Buddhism. The Healing Buddha is an interesting book on that, and I have used as far as that, and I went to try and find it today, and as I have discovered in so many of my books, they've just disappeared over the years. And so Buddhism generally, the Healing Buddha is helpful, but we'll also look at Buddhism bodhisattvas, and they're highly involved in the roots of experience and very involved in healings. And so what might we learn if we not only discover the Buddhas, but we also discover the bodhisattvas of Buddhist history? And so they're motivated by the thought and enlightenment, but they're also motivated with the desire to help people in need. And their number one need is, I'm sick. And so there's a natural connection between first helping them with their sickness and then also helping them achieve enlightenment. In an attempt to verify enlightenment, healing arts are used And so let's sort of work on the concept of healing. Buddhism defines most illnesses as psychosomatic. It's in your head. And so that recognition of where most illness is right there. What is pain? It's a head disorder. Your head is interpreting what's going on somewhere else in your body. But it is a head disorder. And we manage the pain, adjusting, dealing with it, to solve the head problem. Right? And so many of our drugs are to manage the head problem. Tylenol, all your non-steroidal anti-inflammatories certainly help here, but they do a lot up here as well, so that you don't recognize the pain anymore. You still got it, but they're interfering with your ability to interpret it. There's an awful lot of their ways of working for a lot of pain suppression. So we're slowly affirming that by modern medicine, that psychosomatic disorders are really quite profound. The prime disease is ignorance of how to live sanely in this world and attune one's mind to the reality of existence. For this, the prime remedy is the intuitive wisdom that arises when delusion and consequent negativity are overcome. How much is a positive attitude helpful towards disease? A whole lot. or positive attitude of people around you towards disease. And so your mind is very involved. So Buddhism is far more pragmatic. The cause of the disease is an aging body, a difficult life, and bad karma. Disease will serve to spur the spiritually attuned onward toward liberation. And again, there's also that sense of the cyclical nature. We talked about it with Mother Teresa, that there's that recognition that you're getting old, but you're going to get a new body here pretty quick, and that positivity that comes out of, well, okay, I'm going to get rid of this one, I'm going to get a new one. And that positivity can come from that as well. And so historically, there was an initial prohibition of the practice of the medical arts so that one could seek enlightenment. So that you just sort of walled yourself away from what was going on in your body. Because everything from enlightenment's point of view was to be found within the self. Later monks found the benefits of employing healing abilities. That helped them to spread their teachings and to convert non-believers. When we go back to Sukamuni Buddha, which is Gautama Buddha in other traditions, same person, he was motivated to begin his spiritual search after seeing a sick person, dead person. But the suffering person is the person he could help. And so Buddhism is completely focused on reducing suffering. Well, it's going to have its most valuable effects on wherever it can do that successfully. The Buddha is portrayed in the Pali Canon as a great healer, whose methods were twofold. He healed through teaching, and his miraculous healings was his psychic, his mind ways of getting your head straightened around so that you lived better and healthier. And that ability to adjust that was part of it. But he also has had some miraculous healings attributed to his work. A laywoman, Supiya, who secretly cut off a section of her leg to provide a meat broth for an ill monk, was healed instantly by the Buddha, who then declared it a grave offense to eat human flesh. Okay, I can't control the story. I can just sort of tell it. That is one of the funkiest stories in the history of religious, of the religious life. I mean, it just sort of, wow. Okay, how do we get some meat for our monk? Anyway, just sort of let that story settle in for a moment. Okay. There were also those with incurable diseases who received lessons on impermanence. Sadly, our religious people can be part of the problem. If you go into an emergency department and say, what group of people probably gives you the most problems in an emergency setting? And they'll probably say religious people, because they'll say, well, they come in and they demand a miracle. And they can't get a miracle. People are dying. They will die. But people will be praying for miracles to do that. And so there's that recognition. Okay, what's your pathway once you discover it's incurable? Well, pray for a miracle. Well, what is that going to do to your mind? What happens if you get a lesson on impermanence instead? Things are changing. It's always changing. Nothing is permanent. You are a river. Sticking your toe in the river is going to give you a different experience every time you do it. And so there is a wonderful lesson on impermanence within Buddhism that other religions need to learn often. And so that pragmatism that comes with Buddhism is so valuable that other traditions really need to take a lesson on. And so the Buddha himself was seen as a healing guru, and that's the name attached to the as the healing guru. And healing practices were part of the Buddhist monastic tradition. Medical centers privileging humanistic values that were attached to Buddhist monasteries catered to the monks and laity. And so over the course, they would add medical centers. Buddhist monks disseminated Indian medical knowledge westward to Persia and Central Asia, to China and Southeast Asia. And so as you're discovering, it's a different way of thinking. And so when they brought that to people, people realized, hey, whatever's is not working in my world, maybe this will help. And it did. And so the Indian knowledge came to be valuable wherever Buddhism went. Buddhism also took with it medical knowledge to the southern part of the subcontinent, Sri Lanka, especially during after the reign of Ashoka the Great. And so as these empires moved people around, then the knowledge was the thing that came in after the armies left, is the knowledge came with them. The overriding factor in Buddhist healings is the seeking of new insight that could lead to liberation. And so whatever Buddhism is, it's getting you to put on a new pair of glasses to see life differently. And that way of seeing life differently will help you with your physical and mental difficulties. There's that central focus, that's the process of healing. The Buddha may have sought to heal a physical disease, but it seemed to serve as a pretext to the higher coloring of offering a cure to the more nagging disease, that of ignorance and craving. So what happens if you can knock down the craving? You get more peace. Yeah. What happens if you teach people they shouldn't eat that steak? They get healthier because they might turn to vegetarianism, or they might turn to a healthier, a Mediterranean diet, if they're not always chewing on this red meat, that their desire has been tuned in by their context. We live in a ranching community where everybody wants to sell you their red meat. And so you eat the red meat and you temporarily feel better, but then you wonder, why am I sick all the time? Why am I having gut issues? Why is da-da-da-da-da-da-da? Well, your craving is leading to bad consequences that you don't even know about, because your whole society is wanting you to crave. And so when you attune your mind, get your glasses on,
see that living a different lifestyle, you get healthier. Whoa, isn't that beneficial? And that ignorance of where to look is what's crucial. There's other sages, other Buddhas later on, and we don't know the date of this particular person, but you can hear now how they can sort of talk through this. How does Buddhism arrive at a more pragmatic way of communicating with people? And here's some of that language. The body is always ill. Get over it. Do something else, but focus on it. Therefore, the ideal that he directed all toward was that of a Buddha body with perfect enlightenment. The beauty of enlightenment is it doesn't need the body. The point of enlightenment is to detach you, in essence, from the body. And then when the body is gone, who cares? You've got what's more important anyway. You've got the enlightenment that comes from detaching yourself from the body. And so with the goal of enlightenment, that's more important anyway. So stop worrying about your ill body. Just deal with it. Illness should become a catalyst, the ultimate function of which is to stimulate renewed and increased dedication to spiritual work. Each must face the recognition that all people are equal when illness is the offending agent. And this recognition should yield a solidarity among people. With this other-centeredness that results from understanding illness, a bodhisattva should increase one resolve to come to another's aid. We are all sick, therefore we are all one. And in that oneness, I will help you in your sickness. What can we do to get it through? And so you're starting to see some of that logic that Buddhism has helped people with. And so when you're a Buddhist physician, or really any physician, you should be an outside agent of healing. One of the terms that modern physicians use, modern doctors in Western medicine, is that of dispassionate compassion. You must have compassion, which means I'm going to get close to you and listen to your problems. But you must be dispassionate in the sense that I am not going to get involved with your problems. I am simply going to be your guide. And so here's that dispassion. So you're trying to not let your passions, your desire to help people, you're putting a barricade up there. So it's an interesting, so you're having this wonderful conundrum of getting close with your passions and moving away from your passions. It's a wonderful term that you see in medical literature about what's the attitude of a physician. Retaining compassion for the patient, yet showing no mercy for the disease. To look past the illness reminds a patient that life is a focal point outside oneself, to point past the singularity of one's life. And so that attitude Buddhism really has an impact on, because that's what it's trying to do all the time. There's other bodhisattvas of healing that we see in Buddhism, those that have attained enlightenment but choose to remain with other and not achieve nirvana. There's your definition of a bodhisattva. Okay? Those that have attained enlightenment but chosen to remain with others and not achieve nirvana. That is your definition of a bodhisattva. You have a couple brothers that is referenced in the literature, the King of Healing and the Supreme Healer. The King of Healing, the duty of this teacher is to convey the law to all those who may be ill. It is then the law that has the power to heal. For the teacher to attain the status of healer, there must be a sacrifice of self. 5 prerequisites are met: unceasing compassion and uncompromising deportment. Filial piety, which means caring for your parents. And 10 wholesome precepts: abstinence from murder, theft, adultery, lies, slander, use of harsh language, frivolous talk, covetous thought, malice, heretical views. And the result is peace and quiescence of body and mind. I guarantee you, if you can get rid of all those things in your life, you're going to be healthy. You're just more peaceful. Listening to the expanded teachings without harboring doubts, neither drowning in emotions or backsliding in spiritual progress. And believe in the eternity of the Buddha, his mind unceasingly flowing like a running stream towards ultimate truth. And so just some of the thinking of Buddhist thought. The King of Healing, another one. The devotee seeks to have a vision of the King of Healing. This vision offers the healing of 404 diseases that inflict the body, and various fundamental teachings are transmitted. To obtain this vision, 5 meditations must be successfully cultivated. Stabilize your thought by counting your breaths, pacifying the mind, non-exhaling a breath. That would cause a vision. That's called a carbon dioxide buildup. Reflecting on the absolute form, and a serene abiding in the meditative trance. So this is a really interesting way that folks have think through how to become a healer. They want to emulate the King of Healing, and they use their trances as a way of creating the vision to emulate this healer. So it's another interesting way that Buddhists have found healing capacity in their understanding of healing. The supreme healer, the Buddha, says that the successful contemplation of the supreme healer requires 7 prerequisites: constant delight in holding to the precepts, cultivation of the methods for living in the world and the methods for becoming free of the world. And so you're in that tension. Freedom from arrogance and pride, compassion towards all being, passionless. Okay? That disconnection that's so important. To abode or to abide in undifferentiating truth, cultivation of discernment and calming of mind, and freedom from fear or alarm upon attaining the perfection of insight. So that supreme healer was something that the Buddha said, if you can work on this, then you too can become a spiritual healer within the Buddhist context. Okay, I'm sort of flooding you with stuff. Anything that's catching?
I mean, it sounds like Buddhism. Just in the way that it's coming across, for sure.
Okay. 2 more slides. There was the master of healing. If you're to worship the master of healing, there's a couple things: the ritual use of the name and the desire to change one's lifestyle. So there's another mechanism of healing that you've already seen. If you can get people to use their spiritual tools to change the direction they're going, then you're going to get a benefit, and healing will be one of the results. With this dual intention, one can have a spiritual rebirth and gain freedom from the patterns of unrestrained greed, anger, and egocentric emotional response. And so there again is how we could, if we can break people free of the consumer culture that traps them in America, we're going to give them a gift. And that gift, number 1, will be peacefulness, which will have that sense of being healthier, and we're going to give them economic prosperity. If we can break them of their consumerism, they're going to have more money in the bank. Mm-hmm. Okay? And if we break them from the consumerism, then that drive to attain something is being refocused somewhere else, probably in spiritual pursuits of making themselves better, taking care of themselves. And so that's valuable. But then we sort of say, for you to be healthy, you need to help others. And to really, the redirection often is stop looking at your own illness and look at how you can help other people. That other-centeredness is often not centered on uplifting a neighbor, but looking past this person onto the path of desired enlightenment. The healing of bodily ailments requires a requisite amount of faith by the participant for successful therapy. However, there is the expectation that the insights that result from the experience will assist in altering the defective thoughts, words, and deeds that might be impeding the quest for enlightenment. So they're always sort of working on two projects. And that sense of we're gonna help you, but we're gonna help you also with the higher goals, not just the immediate goals. Last slide. How in the world do you become a Buddhist spiritual healer? Seek wisdom, aid each other. But here's, boy, the key to Buddhism. Become pragmatic. We get old. We get sick. We die. Look past the illness and see the need to eradicate ignorance and destructive passion. And so, by teaching people about themselves, their society, and the things that are bigger than our society, you take them to a place that is far more valuable to them than just concentrating on their own illnesses, looking past it. And so there's knowledge that needs to be taught, and there's that desperate desire to break them from where their passion takes them. And I'll never forget Colt looking at me like I was from Mars when we had that conversation about passion. Mm-hmm. I hope it's begun to sort of settle in on him, and because that was fun for me, as well as I know it was very thought-provoking for him. That we live in a culture that we don't even realize where our passion is taking us. That inevitably it's taking us to illness. The net result of our passion is illness. And by people refocusing off of their passions, they can find health. We think that the jobs that we take is going to make things better. So often they make things worse, and we get stress, and we get frustrations, and we don't find what we thought we were looking at, and that, and again, you've seen me wandering around Albertsons. As I look at the people that are there, I see people that are so utterly trapped in a system that is more than happy to suck up their labor, but gives them back so little for what they get and give. And yet that's all they have. That's all they can hope for in their lives. There is more than that. It isn't, our lives just aren't that job of living to fulfill the passions of other people. There is something that we can do to break them out of that. And so the Buddhist healer, I have expanded to the social healer. I think we can learn a lot from Buddhism on how we can help people to be more pragmatic, to think past themselves, to look at the society around them, to redirect them from bad consequences that we can see they're going after, but they're deeply trapped into the consequences that they're coming at them, and moving them into something that's more important and more valuable. And that's just, in some ways, by looking deeply within, they're moving to something more valuable that's already there for them. Buddhist spiritual healer, what's your takeaway? Anything that you can use in your practice?
Yeah, I actually think this was really good timing right before I'm moving my practice, because I'm going to be reimagining a lot of things that I'm doing. I think I'm going to be taking it in a slightly different direction, probably not as much focus on massage itself, but actually focusing on the spiritual aspect more so than just the body work.
Okay.
So that's already where I was headed, and I think that this is giving me a good framework of how to practically apply what I'm wanting to do when I get to start the video.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. Questions that you have?
I don't think so. I want to check out your paper.
Yeah, thank you.
Buddhism sounds exactly.
What might be meaningful.
Yeah.
So this is the really short version of all of that work.